We begin with news that 17 missionaries from an Ohio-based Christian organization were kidnapped on Saturday in Haiti. A local police chief told the Associated Press that a notorious gang with a history of similar kidnappings was behind the incident. Christian Aid Ministries put out a statement urging prayer for their kidnapped workers, who they say included 16 U.S. citizens, 1 Canadian, 5 men, 7 women, and 5 children. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff was recently in Haiti covering the turmoil in that country, and he has more on our top story.
Savannah, the kidnapping of those Americans and that Canadian missionary just outside of Port-au-Prince raises a host of issues about the security conditions in Haiti. Those are security conditions that we ourselves at NBC News saw firsthand when we were there earlier this month. Our own travel was restricted by the dangers posed not just on the streets of Port-au-Prince, but throughout the country, including in the city center, where we were instructed essentially not to travel alone. We always traveled by vehicle. We were not walking on the street. We couldn't do sort of those daily pedestrian things like go to an ATM or walk to the nearby store outside of the hotel. And that was also the case when we traveled with aid organizations, not missionaries, but international aid organizations, to go deliver aid to those earthquake-ravaged areas in the south, including in Les Cayes and in that commune, Akin, where we traveled not by car, but by plane and by helicopter. For that exact reason, the violence perpetrated by the gangs on the ground in Haiti is so bad, is so pervasive at this time that even the United Nations would not travel in the way that they normally do, by vehicle, to go deliver food, to deliver cash to people who in many cases are literally starving. They have to now fly to avoid gang violence. We saw the same thing in and around Port-au-Prince, where we went to a clinic run by Doctors Without Borders that actually had to shutter another one of their facilities because of gang violence. Those doctors relocated to Tabar outside of Port-au-Prince. But at that facility as well, they see victims of gang violence on a daily basis. 50% of the patients that they have are gunshot wound victims, often from high-power firearms. And the doctors themselves have to be careful in order to avoid the same types of kidnappings that the missionaries themselves have faced. One doctor told us he believes 90% of his patients would leave Haiti if given the chance, and he himself told us that he would leave as well if he could. Savannah?
All right, Jacob, thank you so much. Let's now bring in NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece for more on this. Shannon, good morning. So what's the latest from the White House on this kidnapping, and what have we heard from the State Department?
Well, the State Department did confirm over the weekend that these 17 people had been abducted, including 16 American citizens. Of course, as you mentioned in that earlier report, some of those include children. The State Department said that they are in regular contact with Haitian authorities. In a statement, they said, "We are engaging with Haitian authorities at the senior-most levels." They said that the welfare and the safety of U.S. citizens abroad is one of the highest priorities of the Department of State. We've been in regular contact with senior Haitian authorities and will continue to work with them and interagency partners as well. Now, we have not heard directly from the White House on this. Of course, this occurred over the weekend, and that will certainly be one of the questions myself and other reporters I know will be pressing on today.
Absolutely. And Shannon, I know these gangs are known for demanding ransoms. Is the U.S. government considering paying them off to release the people who are being held?
So there is a long-standing policy by the U.S. government that they do not pay ransoms. And the reason behind that is because of concern that it could encourage future kidnappings. It could incentivize bad actors, gangs, criminals with ransom payments. So that has not occurred in the past, and no anticipation that that would occur in this situation as well.
And Shannon, these kidnappings actually come just days after U.S. officials visited Haiti, and that was on a mission to help strengthen the country's police force and reduce gang violence. What came out of that trip, and how is the U.S. planning to help Haiti deal with the multiple crises it's facing?
Well, Haiti has certainly gotten a lot higher on the Biden administration's radar over the past few months, unfortunately, because of the string of tragic events that have happened there. The assassination of the president, there was an earthquake followed by a hurricane. We saw a flood of Haitian migrants to the border, thousands of them, because of those conditions in the country. So the U.S. has said they are going to step up aid efforts. Obviously, top officials there over the past few days talking about how they can address this very issue we're confronting now. The most recent commitment from the United States was $15 million, the State Department said during that visit, to help with these efforts.
All right, Shannon, thank you so much. Turning now to the COVID vaccine booster race, millions of Americans are waiting to see if they'll be eligible for a booster shot from either Moderna or Johnson & Johnson. The FDA must now decide if they will approve the committee's recommendation to administer those shots. If approved, all three authorized COVID vaccines in the U.S. will have a booster option available. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park joins us now from New York with the latest on these COVID booster shots. Kathy, good morning. So both Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson COVID booster shots are now going to the FDA for review. Are these shots, these boosters, at all different from the original vaccine shot administered?
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. So last week, the FDA Advisory Committee met and discussed both of these boosters, Moderna and J&J. So I'll start with Moderna. Similar to the Pfizer booster shots, this is recommended for those 65 and older, those with underlying health conditions, and people who have occupations that put them at higher risk of catching the virus. But if you're getting a booster, according to this panel, they are recommending just a half dose on the Moderna booster. When it comes to the J&J, keep in mind this is just a one-dose shot. So moving forward, if you decide to get this booster and once it gets the final approval from the FDA and the CDC, it would be eligible for those 18 and older at least 2 months after that initial dose, Savannah.
Now, Kathy, we've been talking about the mixing and matching booster shots as a potential here. So what should people who got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine know about mixing boosters, and what does the data tell us about doing so, especially since the J&J shot is a different type of shot than Moderna and Pfizer?
So right now, hold off because it's still going through the regulatory process. And in the next couple of days, it will be under review by the FDA. And then eventually the CDC will be signing off. And that's when these boosters can officially be rolled out. But when it comes to these mixing and matching, it's still kind of under review. But we are leaning on data that was shared by the NIH. And essentially, if you are a J&J recipient and found that you're better off receiving a Pfizer or Moderna booster. And Dr. Anthony Fauci had more to say on this yesterday. Take a listen.
If you look at the data from J&J that presented to the FDA when they use their own product as the boost, it's based on clinical data from a clinical trial. The mix and match to which you refer shows that when you boost Moderna or Pfizer against the original J&J, you get a much higher antibody level. And I believe there's going to be a degree of flexibility of what a person who got the J&J originally can do, either with J&J or with the mix and match from other products.
So in this NIH study, volunteers received either their original vaccine or a different brand. But regardless of whichever shot you got, essentially the antibodies went up and your immunity got boosted regardless of whether you got the J&J, Pfizer, or Moderna. Savannah.
All right, Kathy Park, lots to watch for here. Thank you so much. Now, since August, 17 school employees have died from COVID in just one Florida district. That's the Polk County School District. And it says it doesn't know how the employees contracted the virus, but their families say their lives have been changed forever.
I want people to know my son's story. I want them to know that it's bigger than just him. And I'm starting to understand that my son is just one teardrop in this bucket of grief that this nation and this world is feeling.
One teardrop in a bucket of grief. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us now from Auburndale, Florida. Cal, good morning. So that woman we just heard from was the mother of one of those 17 school employees who passed away from COVID, and her son was just 24 years old. What else did she tell you?
Yeah, he was a hometown hero in many ways. He grew up here, went off to college, was a college athlete, then came back to be a teacher. He was a biology teacher. Now, 12 of, you said, 17 faculty, 17 staff members in the county have died since August. 12 of them actually returned to school to start teaching. He was one of those 12. And his mother is obviously devastated. He died last month on September the 14th. One of the things that haunts her, I think, is the vaccine, and that he didn't have a vaccine. She's hoping that sitting down and doing this interview is going to make a difference to people in the future. Take a listen. I'm sorry, so we don't have that sound. One of the things that she regrets is that her son didn't get a vaccine, and she laid it out for us that it was one of the most haunting things that I could ever imagine. She actually had a nurse, as he coded just before he died, say to her, you need to go get the vaccine right now. It is one of those tragic stories that we're hearing about across the country, and it sort of highlights the difficulty that we're seeing in these places where you have these political battle lines being drawn, Savannah.
All right, Cal, thanks for paraphrasing that sound for us. And of course, it's just heartbreaking to hear about. Now, as we've both mentioned now, several employees were lost in this one school district due to COVID. But Ms. Dorsey told you she doesn't blame the district. What does she say is the problem?
You know, one of the problems is the politics here at play. It's not just Florida. You have Republican governors across the country who are taking away or trying to prevent local control, which is, of course, normally a traditional Republican value. So here in the state of Florida, for example, you have Governor DeSantis, who is saying that the local school districts cannot make their own mask mandates. He's banning that. So 6 school districts have actually gone against the governor, but now you see in the State House they're passing legislation to even dock some of the pay for some of the school board members, to withhold funding from those school districts. So you have this political fight, and you have literally in Florida millions of children sort of caught in the middle, Savannah.
All right, and Cal, what's the school district saying about all these deaths and what's being done to help try to stop the spread at their schools?
Yeah, you know, one of the things, obviously, they can't do is put masks in. They are putting in 50,000 desk shields. That, they're saying, is going to be very important. We do have some sound, I think, from a member of the teachers union I spoke to yesterday. Take a listen.
It is a state problem. Our state leadership has failed us. They have decided to dabble in the politics of division instead of taking care of our students and our staff and our communities.
We have a full screen I think we can put up from the county here. We reached out to them for comment. It's obviously been a very difficult time for them. They wrote back to us, and I'm just going to pull it up right now. They've written back to us and said, quote, the pandemic continues to severely impact our community, and many public servants, including educators, healthcare staff, rescue workers, and law enforcement officers, are experiencing tragic losses. Every death is a devastating blow to our community and reinforces the need for all people to continue taking precautions to reduce the spread of the illness. That, for example, is why they're putting in those 50,000 death shields here in this one school district, Savannah.
All right, Cal, heartbreaking reporting there. Thank you so much. Let's now bring in Dr. Mario Ramirez for more. Dr. Ramirez is an emergency physician and the former pandemic and emerging threats coordinator in the Office of Global Affairs for Health and Human Services. Dr. Ramirez, always great to have you with us. Thank you so much. So new data from the American Academy of Pediatrics shows September had the most COVID cases and deaths among children. Should we be sounding the alarm, especially at this point when children ages 5 to 11 aren't eligible for a vaccine? And how important will that be once it does become available to that age group?
Well, so I think what the data shows, Savannah, is that the Delta variant is continuing to spread quite aggressively in unvaccinated populations. And so much of what we have been stressing over the last few months is for adults to get vaccinated to try and protect kids as much as possible. And we are getting extremely close, hopefully to a finish line where a pediatric vaccine for kids down to age 5 is going to become available most likely soon after November the 3rd, when the CDC is scheduled to take up that decision. And so what I, sort of counsel folks is that this data shows that kids continue to be at risk, but hopefully after November 3rd, we're going to really turn the corner and be able to protect kids much more effectively. And so it'll be really important for parents to get their kids vaccinated as soon as it becomes available.
Now, Dr. Ramirez, as we've been discussing this morning, there's this possibility that COVID vaccine boosters will be authorized for all 3 shots and available soon. But there is concern that the vaccination gap is growing, that we're kind of stalling out on who's even getting those first, and in some cases, depending on which vaccine, second doses. What do you think about this gap, and how do you think we close it at this point?
So it looks like, Savannah, over the last week, the U.S. averaged about 860 new doses of COVID vaccine per week. And of those, about 2/3 were boosters, and about 1/3 were left to folks getting their very first dose. There's been an ongoing debate within the scientific community about whether or not boosters are really necessary. And, I've always been on the side that I think boosters are necessary for folks, and I encourage people to get boosters broadly across the population, because I think it's critically important for protecting the entirety of the herd. But in addition to that, though, I think, the fact that that fraction of people who are getting their first dose is shrinking shows that now isn't the time to let up on our outreach efforts. It shows that we still have work to do. And it shows that we probably need some of the public policy efforts that the Biden administration is pushing. And those are things like vaccine requirements or testing mandates and things that are going to help to sort of push those folks into getting their first dose.
All right, Dr. Mario Ramirez, we always appreciate your expertise here. Thank you for being up early with us. Now, former Trump senior advisor Steve Bannon is facing a move to hold him in criminal contempt over his refusal to comply with a subpoena. The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol will vote on the measure tomorrow. The move puts more pressure on the former president's associates to turn over documents and testify in front of the committee. NBC News congressional correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. Ali, good morning. So how aggressively is the committee going after Steve Bannon, and how has he responded so far?
I mean, aggressively, because the point here, Savannah, has always been that time is of the essence. They moved straight to subpoenas for people like Steve Bannon because they knew that they weren't going to be likely to comply with the request. Now what this does is it sets up the legal battle that all of us have been looking forward to. The former president, Donald Trump, saying that because of executive privilege, these folks, including Steve Bannon, should not comply with the committee's subpoena request. Bannon, for his part, is saying that he's not defying Congress's orders. He's just listening to the former president. But there's a big question here about if former presidents can exert legal privilege, executive privilege, for things from their time in the White House. And also, it's important to point out, Bannon wasn't working in the White House at this point. All of that sets up a vote for tomorrow night from the House Select Committee. They're going to be voting on this criminal contempt referral. Then it will have to go to the full House in order for it to be referred to DOJ. But listen to how Congressman Adam Kinzinger is talking about what this vote could mean going forward.
This, potential criminal contempt referral, or will be criminal contempt referral for Steve Bannon, is the first shot over the bow. It's very real, but it says to anybody else coming in front of the committee, don't think that you're going to be able to just kind of walk away and we're going to forget about you. We're not.
So that's what he's saying. We know that that vote is coming then tomorrow night. And again, it then has to go to the full House before it can go to DOJ. But all of this is going to take more time.
Now, Ali, there's also the spotlight on former Trump Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark and his potential role in the days leading up to the insurrection. What does the committee want to know about him?
Well, look, certainly he's been at the center of all of this because he's one of the key people that the former president was talking to about ways in which they could basically subvert election results. We know that at higher echelons within the DOJ, there were stopgaps and people willing to say no, that they weren't willing to go along with these things. At the same time, though, Clark has really been at the center of all of this. And again, it speaks to the way that the committee is undergoing their work. They're looking not just at the rallies that were actually planned on January 6th. Now we see them branching into the DOJ and key figures who were there. We know that others in the Department of Justice during the Trump days have already spoken to the committee about what was going on in the waning days of the Trump administration. And then, of course, the subpoenas that we were just talking about, that first initial round of people who were very close to the former president. All of this paints a picture of the broad range of questions that the committee is trying to answer, not just about the granular details of the rallies that were actually planned and went on January 6th, but about what was going on behind the scenes in different parts of the government in the waning weeks of the Trump administration.
Ali Vitale, who has had a lot to keep an eye on for us lately as our Capitol Hill correspondent. Thank you so much. Always great to have you. Now, former President Bill Clinton is waking up at home this morning after being released from a Southern California hospital where he'd been battling an infection. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has more on his recovery.
Savannah, good morning. Doctors here in Southern California say they will continue to monitor the former president's progress, even as he recovers now in the comfort of his New York home. The 42nd president is back home in New York after a health scare led to 5 nights in a Southern California hospital.
How are you feeling?
With a thumbs up and wife Hillary on his arm, former President Bill Clinton walked slowly out of UC Irvine Medical Center Sunday morning, thanking a line of healthcare workers one by one. His doctor reporting his fever and white blood cell count are normalized, adding they were honored to have treated him and will continue to monitor his progress. The 75-year-old was in town for a Clinton Foundation event, but felt ill Tuesday. He was diagnosed with a urinary tract infection that spread to his bloodstream. Doctors delivering antibiotics through an IV, which we're told extended his stay. Just describe the gravity of something like this for someone at 75.
When older individuals develop those kinds of infections, they can very quickly become life-threatening. And then the hospitalization becomes much more significant.
The two-term president has a history of heart problems. In 2004, he had a quadruple bypass, prompting him to make major lifestyle changes and later become vegan.
I've been given like a new lease on life, so I felt like I should do more of the things I'm doing now.
Over the weekend, Clinton receiving calls from former President Bush and VP Gore. The current administration also assured by his progress.
He seems to be, God willing, doing well.
Progress that's cleared Clinton to head home. And he will finish his antibiotics in his New York home. Health experts say between his age and health history, he may need several weeks of rest and rehabilitation. Savannah?
All right, Emily, thank you so much. Let's now get a check on your morning news now weather, which means Bill Cairns joins us. Hi, Bill. Happy Monday.
I want summer back.
I know. This morning was cold.
I know. Yeah, we were so lucky for so long. And once reality came back, it feels so cold, but this is kind of how it's supposed to be. We're just not used to it. And I'm talking about not just the Northeast or New York City. I'm talking about all of the Eastern Seaboard. So this is the current temperatures. And, we could be in the 30s this time of year, but, in the 40s, and New York City's at 50 right now. It feels chilly. And Central Park did go down below 50 degrees. This was the second latest calendar date that it's ever taken to go below 50 in New York City. The record was October 20th, which we almost got to. So we're cool on both coasts. Thankfully, we had some rain in Northern California, even some snow at the high elevations overnight. So the rainy season has officially begun in the West. So we'd love to hear about that. Middle of the country is still very warm today. It's a cool morning, beautiful fall afternoon. Temperatures are still unusually warm, though, like Minneapolis at 77 this time of year, 20 degrees warmer than it should be. And you notice in the Northeast, highs in the 50s and 60s. That's kind of how it should be. Same for you in Atlanta and Charlotte and Nashville with temperatures in the low 70s. Tomorrow, that cool shot of air moves through the Rockies into the northern plains. You notice that we're still very warm tomorrow. Beautiful start to your week, St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee. And the end of this week, some of that warmer air shifts east. We're going to be near 80 degrees from Myrtle Beach to Raleigh. New York City even returns back into the 70s. So as far as rainfall goes, not a lot this week. It's a pretty quiet week. We have that storm today that will take through the Rockies into the northern plains. East Coast looks dry pretty much all week long. And then we watch the West Coast, which, again, we want the rain. It looks like you're going to get it, a rainy weather pattern for the Northern California all the way through Oregon and Washington State. So this is a rather enjoyable week, Savannah. And, for weather people like myself, this is the good week to catch up on all those emails and clean the office after a long hurricane season.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.